It's that time of year again, where the flowers are blooming, the birds are chirping, and the video games, they're dying. 2025 was a rough year for the video game industry. It seems like more and more people are less and less excited to try out new games, or are actively preying on their downfall. People on Twitter are sharing Steam charts of games like I share pictures of my baby, except in one case, it's adorable, and in the other, it's weird and sad. I make this series with the goal of discussing what went wrong with each of these games so that hopefully future games can learn from those mistakes. Not to dunk on any of these developers, there's no need to kick them when they're down. So let's get right into it. Sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and enjoy this year's episode of DEADGAMES Dead Games. DEADGAMES Dead Games. DEADGAMES Dead Games. Dead Games. But before we talk about dead games, let's talk about a game with 325 million active players. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you're also a big fan of Marvel. I would consider myself a pretty big fan of Marvel as well. I have a lot of costumes. And if you need more Marvel in your life, like I do, you could play today's sponsor, Marvel Contest of Champions. Because Marvel Contest of Champions is a high-fidelity, arcade-style fighting game, both available on mobile and PC, that you can download right now using the QR code on the screen. And this game features so many Marvel superheroes and villains that you can play as. 350 plus from across the Marvel universe. I really like playing as Black Panther in this game. But seriously, there's gonna be a character here that you're gonna like. There's Wolverine, Spider-Man, and every Marvel character in between. Some deep cuts like Howard the Duck. I guess he's not as deep cut anymore, like people know who Howard the Duck is, right? You go through an epic story with iconic Marvel locations as the backdrop, and you battle superheroes and villains to become the ultimate Marvel champion. It's a pretty simple and fun game to play, with very easy to pick up controls, for all you noobs out there. I found myself playing it pretty casually, while I'm also on dad duties. And the game's constantly being updated with new heroes, new villains, new everything. And with over 325 million people playing this game, you're missing out, and it's free to play. All you gotta do is click the link in the description down below, or use this QR code, and claim the limited time Heavy Hitters bundle that includes 10 champions for free, including Hercules, Thing, Shang-Chi, and Iron Fist. This bundle's only available till May 6th though. Don't miss out and download the game now. Now it's time to talk about... Frag Punk is a 5v5 tactical hero shooter by Bad Guitar Studios, and published by a little company you might have heard of them, NetEase. Frag Punk's main unique gimmick was their shard card system that changed the way every single round was played.
These cards are like chocolate chip cookies.
Like giving enemies big heads, or making the whole map have grass, etc, etc. While the game did have a solid aesthetic, with pretty unique character designs, the game never really caught on, and is by most metrics dead. So what went wrong with Frag Punk? I'm not a Frag Punk expert. I did make a few videos on it, so I do have some insight. But to help out, I called my good friend Artie IRL to provide his perspective, as he worked alongside the developers and was a caster for Frag Punk. And fun fact, we actually met casting a Frag Punk Twitch Rivals event, and we've been friends ever since. Go follow him if you haven't. So one of the core issues Frag Punk had was the shard card system being a bit too random, especially when you don't have a full squad, since the shard cards are voted on by the team, so the average solo player experience was just less enjoyable. But from a competitive perspective, Artie had this to say.
On God, I actually really enjoyed the comp scene for that game. At like the lower levels of gameplay, it can just not be fun, because you could just have somebody that just like, you know, absolutely pops off and knows how to play with the cards, but the vast majority of the casual players don't know how to play with the cards. When you're at the very top level of the game though, like that's who this game was built for, because like seeing all the pro teams kind of go at it at like, you know, a World Clash in China last year, the level of competition was out of this world. When you had teams that were doing like 5D chess, playing cards to like bait out the other team to do things with their cards, and then they had like a separate card that they were ready to use for it. It was just this whole thing where, oh my God, it was honestly one of my top 10 like esports experiences.
In my opinion, Frag Punk was trying to do too much. It had the shard cards, but it was also a hero shooter, and I feel like it could have toned down some things to streamline and simplify the gameplay, like giving players the ability to create a deck of their favorite cards, kind of like the game Friends vs. Friends. In that game, you can full-on deck build, and the cards aren't used in between rounds, but during the round. Frag Punk instead chose an approach that slowed the gameplay down to a halt.
The pacing is very awkward, whereas like Valorant, you just are in the pre-round, you're in the game. You're in the pre-round, you're in the game. The pick and ban phase, I think for the cards is too slow. It pulls people out of it, where you kind of have this pacing. It's kind of like Rainbow Six at the very beginning, where you have this phase where you're not really playing, you're doing this setup stuff, and then it comes in, then you have your pre-round phase, and then you get into your game, which you could just die off rip, and then it's not really fun for players that just die immediately because, oh, well, I just waited 2 minutes for this round to start. Now I have to wait another, 3 or 4 minutes before I play again for another maybe 30 seconds.
And while Artie and I both agree that the aesthetic itself isn't the issue, some of their more over-the-top designs can feel a bit off. It definitely has more of the feel of a mobile gacha game, which can make it look and feel cheap, especially with AI art. Yikes. So if your competition is Valorant or CSGO, then this game was never gonna take off. In America. In China though, while we have no way to confirm this, there's rumors that Frag Punk might be doing a lot better overseas.
I mean, yeah, Frag Punk is dead, but Jiewai Guangchao is doing great. So it's...
Is that the game? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Jiewai Guangchao. Well, it is built for a Chinese audience, right? And I think they wanted it to be compatible with the Western audience, but unfortunately it just kind of wasn't.
So Frag Punk, while a lot of its ideas weren't bad, the end result was a bloated mess that just didn't catch on for most players. For a lot of people, Frag Punk frag stunk. Highguard. A team of mostly ex-Respawn developers created a 3v3 raid shooter that, after its trailer in the Game Awards, never had a chance. It might be the first game I've ever discussed to be completely shut down in less than a month. So, what went wrong with Highguard? Where do I begin? The actual raid idea had a lot of potential and can sometimes lead to some awesome gameplay moments, but getting to that point felt like a chore. You had these big, expansive maps with literally nothing to do on them but farm minerals and loot. And you'd do this between every single raid phase every time. It would start to become very tedious, just the amount of dead air and dead space, which was definitely exacerbated by the fact that it was a 3v3 shooter. 3v3 for a map the size of a battle royale. To make up for this, you had the horses, which were fun to ride, but in my opinion, not the most engaging combat. Chasing down people on horses had its moments, but most of the time it was an open area on horses. It got a little bit repetitive. And even when you get to the raid, there wasn't really much you could do besides break walls on offense or repair walls on defense. I almost think the game would have benefited from the finals level destruction, because then it would be less about this constant battle of breaking and building walls and more about positioning and using your abilities effectively. Now, when it comes to the aesthetic, I really didn't like how inconsistent it was. You'd be on a horse with the guy who looks like a bear, but also he has an AK-47. I just wish they went more all in on this aesthetic, like making all the weapons feel like magic and not like this is literally just a gun. And you can feel this throughout the game, especially in the character designs. When it comes to the hero designs, besides Una and Kai, they range from generic to just bad. Not Concord levels by any means, but they could have definitely chosen a much better design philosophy. Like, imagine the game looked more like Breath of the Wild, and the characters were allowed to have more over-the-top proportions. I think people would have latched onto the designs a lot more, but instead, they looked like Apex Legends OCs, in a bad way.
Hell no, man. What the fuck?
And full transparency, I am friends with a lot of the people who worked on this game. And because of that, I was asked to playtest the game a few times before they even released it. During this playtest, I was allowed to give feedback. I did everything I could to try and make this game better before it released. Most of my feedback is what I talked about in this video, and I brought it up in the playtests. So when the game officially released, I was blown away that almost nothing I had issues with changed. They probably didn't have the time or resources to delay their game any further, but I really wish they did, because it needed a full-on overhaul. There are elements in Highguard that are really cool, surrounded by a lot of elements that are bad or just plain boring. I do wish the game had more time to improve, because I played it on its last day. Indeed, one last ride. And they added this interesting skill tree system, as well as a 5v5 mode. And all that combined was starting to feel a lot better, but it just completely shut down. Apparently, Tencent was actually funding the game behind the scenes, and they pulled the plug, which was crazy to find out because even I didn't know that, and I met these developers like a year ago. But I just think regardless, it really sucked that they never really had a chance to improve or even unlist their game and retry later. It's just gone forever. These developers are really talented people, so I hope they all end up finding more work and creating more games. But Highguard just couldn't shoot high enough. In one of my earlier Dead Games videos, I covered the death of the original Splitgate. The developers 1047 Games received $100 million in investor funding to work on future projects. And with the Splitgate player base at an all-time low, they put that on the back burner to work on a new project. This ended up being Splitgate 2. Now, I won't lie, I love Splitgate. I am such a classic Halo fanboy, pair that with Portals, and this really was my cup of tea. But after it released, it couldn't retain a player base, and 1047 pulled the plug on Splitgate 2. So, what went wrong? Well, a few things. Splitgate 2 felt like it was chasing the ghost of trends. It turned the Splitgate game into a class-based shooter, and the reception to this change was mixed. I didn't mind the idea of a class-based shooter, but the actual designs of these Splitgate classes were a bit meh. It didn't help that their aesthetic was this sci-fi space vibe that I just honestly didn't jive with, but unfortunately what these classes did was bloat the weapon pool. For some reason, every class had their own SMG, assault rifle, shotgun, burst rifle, and carbine. So right off the bat, that was 15 guns. And it's not easy making 3 separate assault rifles feel different. And from a developer perspective, that's just extra work. They definitely could have had the weapon pool just be generic across the classes, and that would have decreased the amount of weapons and streamlined the game. The movement did receive an upgrade, introducing sliding that carries momentum through portals, which did feel great. So while it was an update to Splitgate, it was still Splitgate for better or for worse. If you liked Splitgate, you'd probably like this game, and if you didn't really care for Splitgate, this was probably not for you. But 1047 was hyping up that they had more in store. Would it be a campaign? Maybe they got ahead of the trends and got an extraction shooter? Nope, none of that. And after a very strange and kind of cringe announcement at the Game Awards, the game launched their Battle Royale mode in 2025.
What?
Look, I love Battle Royales, and I personally really liked a lot of the ideas introduced in this game's BR, but you can just tell that the general player base was not into this at all. It just felt too late, and when the player count fell off really quickly, 1047 saw the writing on the wall, and they pulled the plug, and decided to relaunch Splitgate again as Splitgate Reloaded, which is a nice return to form. They decided to remove the classes in that game. So if you're a fan of the original game, you'll probably like Splitgate Reloaded, but either way, it's too little too late. All the issues that Splitgate 1 had carried over to its sequel, and it ended up having the same trajectory. The developers have said that they would keep developing Splitgate Reloaded, but now they're also working on what could be a Titanfall successor in the back, which I'm pretty excited for, so I'll keep my eyes peeled for that when it drops. But until then, Splitgate 2 just couldn't split players from their favorite games. Supervive was a game that was attempting to be a MOBA battle royale, which I know sounds kind of crazy, but it kind of worked. And with ex-Riot developers on board, including Joe Tung, who used to be the executive VP for League of Legends, they knew what they were doing when it came to a MOBA. However, in February of this year, it closed its doors for good. So, what went wrong? Well, this game, unlike all the others I talked about, was definitely a bit of a lower budget kind of game. I only ever heard about it because they sponsored me to stream it. So I think marketing wise, it just never really was on people's radar. But ultimately, I think the MOBA market is so hard to break into, especially when the competition is League of freaking Legends and Dota 2. The only MOBA to have any recent success is Deadlock, and that's made by Valve, and Valve doesn't miss. But it being a battle royale was the unique hook that this game had. However, I think it's also its greatest downfall. Battle royale fatigue was at an all-time high at this point. It's why a lot of people weren't interested in Splitgate 2. And at the same time, a lot of the top battle royale games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, and Warzone all had to make big overhauls to streamline and simplify their games to help retain players. Fortnite got rid of building. Apex Legends made it so you could respawn your teammates way easier. This was all for the goal of simplifying the game to reach the most amount of players, and it paid off. But Supervive wasn't simple at all. It had the complexity of a MOBA, and MOBAs work better when your death isn't permanent, because snowballing into an overpowered beast is the best part about the MOBA genre. But half of your games, you'll be dead before you even get to that point, before ever seeing that potential. Pair that with the randomness of a BR, and it's a gameplay loop that's too frustrating for traditional MOBA players and too complex for BR players. It was unfortunately a game for nobody, which sucks because these character designs were awesome. I loved the art style, and I even liked the gameplay when I did play it, but it just never stuck with people. Supervive, super died. Now let's talk about some honorable mentions. These are games I'm not covering this year because they still got life in them, or they're not dead at all, but people are definitely going to ask about it in the comments. Marathon still has a decent amount of players playing the game, but I won't lie to you, as a fan of this game, it's not looking too hot. But I'm gonna give it some time because I know people that play this game on a daily basis and absolutely adore it, so I do feel like Marathon has a chance to make a comeback. But it's not dead yet, but hopefully I don't have to talk about it next year. It's just funny because technically Overwatch 2's gone now because they got rid of the 2, you know? So Arc Raiders is on a pretty strong decline, but their numbers are still way better than most games. So I think it'd be ridiculous to even consider it close to being a dead game like the other games we talked about. If the trend continues all the way to next year, then Arc Raiders might have a problem. So that is the 2025 edition of my annual Dead Games video. And remember that developers are human beings too, so please treat them with respect and dignity. You can dislike their game without being a jerk about it. And thank you once again to Marvel Contest of Champions for sponsoring this video, but now I'll catch you later.